Well, as we try to get revved up for an abbreviated season of just 60 games, I think we need to get into a baseball state of mind, don't you? So I'm remembering how much I loved the game growing up here in Cleveland when I was a kid with my friend Steve Smith. We wouldn't just go to Cleveland Municipal Stadium. No, we would also listen at night to the play-by-play announcing by Jimmy Dudley. We did that because we could use our imaginations. So much more fun than television. So I want to start this off with just a little video clip about baseball. You know, in 1955, when Damn Yankees opened on Broadway, baseball was known as the national pastime, as opposed to football and basketball. And George Carlin is going to tell us why.
Baseball is a 19th century pastoral game. Football is a 20th century technological struggle. Baseball is played on a diamond, in a park, the baseball park. Football is played on a gridiron in a stadium, sometimes called Soldier Field or War Memorial Stadium. Baseball begins in the spring, the season of new life. Football begins in the fall when everything is dying.
I totally agree. Steve and I still love the slow pace and the relative quiet of the game. That was just a little bit of George Carlin's classic routine. Well, throughout most of the 1950s and certainly all of the 1960s, you had to work really hard to love our home team in Cleveland. Plagued, woebegone, beleaguered, all of those words described the Indians. They lost money year after year, and they got bailed out every year by investor and superfan Bob Hope, among others. How about that? And my, how we despised those Yankees. All of which is to say that lots of Clevelanders know what it's like to root for a losing ball club. As did the good people of Washington, D.C. Their team, the Senators, basically lived in the cellar of the American League forever. So in 1954, to make the losing cities feel better, Douglas Wallop wrote a novel that became a bestseller. It was called The Year the Yankees Lost the Pennant. And it was about a middle-aged regular guy named Joe Boyd, who had a paunch and who had a receding hairline. Joe makes a bargain with the devil so that he can become the 22-year-old superhero Joe Hardy and lead the Senators to a pennant. The catch being that once that pennant is clinched, he's going to lose his wife and become the property of the devil. In other words, the Faust legend adapted for mid-20th century America. The next year, director George Abbott and the young producer Hal Prince decided to make a Broadway musical out of the book, and Abbott came up with the inspired title, Damn Yankees. Big hit with the bases loaded, 1,019 performances on Broadway, and 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. 3 years later, George Abbott, who was then 71, and Stanley Donen co-directed the film version that you're watching this week. Knocked it out of the park. Walter Kerr said that what made Damn Yankees notable was that it was a fantasy about baseball and hell. But I think it's notable for a bunch of other reasons as well. So let's run through them. For one thing, and this was also true of last month's 1776, virtually the entire original cast was invited to reprise their roles for the film. Very, very unusual. Most important, of course, that meant the great Gwen Verdon as the 172-year-old temptress Lola, the devil's right-hand witch. It had been her first starring role on Broadway, and it had made her a star. She won the second of 4 Tony Awards for it. The other 3, by the way, were for the musicals Can Can, New Girl in Town, and Redhead. But this was her first speaking role in a movie. She modestly recalled co-director Stanley Donen being, quote, very gentle with me because he felt I didn't know what I was doing, which was true. Also notable, just the concept for Mr. Applegate, the devil, knocks me out. Co-star Ray Walston, who also won Broadway's Tony Award for his droll performance, is best remembered, undoubtedly, for My Favorite Martian on TV. But he did lots of stage and film work as well. And in Damn Yankees, there's some sly commentary going on. This devil is a trim figure in a crew cut, suit, and tie, the epitome of the 1950s man in the gray flannel suit, only funny. Here's the scene in which he meets Joe Boyd.
Wham! One long ball hitter, that's what we need. I'd sell my soul for one long ball hitter.
Good evening.
Who are you?
A man who agrees with you.
Agrees?
One long ball hitter. That's what the team needs.
You're right about that. You live around here?
My name is Applegate, and I think we have something in common. A love of the national game.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Care to sit down?
Thank you. You don't like to see the Senators in 7th place.
Well, they may pull together yet.
I'm here to make you a proposition. Not only would you like to see Washington win a pennant, but your secret yearning all your life has been to be a baseball player yourself.
I wasn't so bad in high school.
Not so bad. They were scouting you for Kansas City. You still got your spiked shoes and your glove. They're up in your bedroom.
Who told you?
Would you like to be the greatest baseball player in all history?
Big joke.
No joke. You can be a great ball player.
I can't even bend over and touch my toes.
Try it. Just for laughs.
What do you know?
Well, I could single out at least a half dozen more performers from the original Broadway cast who made it into the movie. But I'm going to limit myself to just one more. Years before she immortalized Edith Bunker in All in the Family on TV, Jean Stapleton was a Broadway treasure. In Damn Yankees, she played one of the baseball wives, and she even gets a reprise of one of the hit songs.
All you really need is heart. When the odds are saying you'll never win, that's when the grin should start. It's the Duke of America, Joe. When your luck is batting 0, get your chin up off the floor. Mister, you can be a hero. You can open any door. There's nothing to it but to do it.
More notable stuff now, and here comes the big casting change. On Broadway, the young slugger Joe Hardy was played by the reliable Broadway baritone Stephen Douglas. And he was fine, but in the film, Tab Hunter took on the role. Now, mind you, he had never done a musical before, but what a smart idea this was. He was 27, and he was not just a movie star, he was a genuine teenage heartthrob. That meant that young people packed theaters for Damn Yankees, which was very cool. And the thing is, surprisingly, is awfully good in this movie. As always, he projects a warm earnestness in everything he does, and he was appropriately in awe of Gwen Verdon. Here he is in the last interview he gave before his death in 2018.
This was a fun film to be a part of. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite films because I hadn't done a musical, and I was so excited about doing a musical and working with that incredible cast and with Gwen and Bobby. And I wish I'd had more dancing to do in the film. You know, I had one little bit with Gwen, you know, but I'd love to have done more. But when in doubt, where I couldn't do steps, he just dropped me to my knee, bound hitting a seat of a chair while Gwen was doing her shtick. I only had one number where I had to do a few little dance steps, and I said, you know, Bobby said, you do this, and I said, this is Bob Fosse, and I said, I have to admit I have 2 left feet. He said, don't worry, you're going to be fine, and he was wonderful. He made you feel so at ease, but he was a perfectionist, and I like that because that pushes you. You know, you don't slack off when you're working in any capacity. Gwen, she was so giving as a person, that if rehearsal need be, she was there. You know, not like a lot of people say, oh, I've done it before, you go ahead, and when you've got it, we'll put it together. No, she was right there from the start. She was amazingly outgoing, really. That really touched me.
And that is from the documentary Merely Marvelous, The Dancing Genius of Gwen Verdon. It was created by my friend and colleague Ken Bloom, and you can stream it on Amazon Prime. I should tell you that a few months ago it was shown on the BBC, so very prestigious. Well, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. That was more than a hit song. As Ethan Morden has written, it became a national catchphrase. And the score was written by a couple of young guys named Richard Adler and Jerry Ross. A year before Damn Yankees, they had conquered Broadway with another George Abbott Hal Prince show, as you may well know, The Pajama Game. I have to confess, I have never liked the phrase show tune. That sounds condescending to me, but the fact is that Adler and Ross wrote very hummable show tunes just before rock and roll hit the airwaves in the 1950s. The songs they wrote are pure 1950s pop, which in Damn Yankees even includes a mambo and the Latin pastiche Lola. Each of them wrote both music and lyrics, and as they said, I love this quote, "We wrote the way our generation demands we write." If you've never heard of them, that's because 6 months after Damn Yankees opened on Broadway, Jerry Ross died at 29. And though his partner carried on without him, Richard Adler never had another hit. But 2 musicals in a row, each of them running more than 1,000 performances on Broadway, that remains quite a doubleheader.
Okay, Smokey, baby, let's go get him.
Right, Rocky. Now, boys, don't forget what I told you. You betcha, Benny.
Come on, Rocky, you tell him.
We've got heart, miles and miles and miles of heart. Oh, it's fine to be a genius, of course, but keep that old horse before the cart. Who minds them pop bottles flying?
The hisses and booze.
The team has been consistent.
Yeah, we always lose,
But we're laughing cause we've got heart. We've got heart. We've got heart.
Back to Gwen Verdon, and this is really notable, and I'm not kidding. Bob Fosse choreographed Damn Yankees both on Broadway and in Hollywood. It was his first solo assignment on Broadway. He won a Tony Award for it, and of course this was the first time that he had worked with Gwen Verdon. Interestingly, They had both been influenced by the choreographer, the great choreographer Jack Cole. Gwen had been Jack Cole's lead dancer. So Bob and Gwen had a lot in common before they even began rehearsing together for the Broadway production. But Bob Fosse was developing his own style, and to say it was fresh and innovative, that's an understatement. Fosse and Verdon, a perfect artistic match. And as many of you know, for the next 30 years, beginning with Damn Yankees on Broadway, despite a tempestuous personal relationship, Gwen Verdon was Bob Fosse's muse.
Gwen recalled the first night they began rehearsing together.
He was very nervous. I was terrified. But he was very nervous, and he said, I've got this dance figured out. A song goes with it. I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna start teaching, I'll just do it. Well, he did it, and it was Lola. And he was fantastic. He's the best Lola that's ever been. I don't care who's done it. He was the best.
I actually think she and Bob Fosse, I mean, a lot of Fosse is Gwen. Gwen and Fosse were one. And he was a star, but a lot of that choreography is coming out of Gwen, no doubt. A lot of his stuff. I mean, he's a genius and a mind, but those steps, a lot of Jack Cole kind of choreography, that's all coming from Gwen. And it was all put in with Fosse, so it all became one thing. So she's responsible, I think, for a lot of his steps, for sure. And she definitely did them better than even he did.
I feel like we're on a Bob Fosse roll here, so I'm going to tantalize you with a couple more clips. I love them, especially because with this first one, when you think about it, you would not think this would be a Bob Fosse number, but it is. It's Shoeless Joe from Hannibal Moe, which was Joe Hardy's nickname given to him by a reporter in the musical. The thing is, how do you choreograph a routine for a bunch of baseball players? Well, if you're Bob Fosse, you do it by creating a hoedown, of course. You may remember the musical review done on Broadway, and it also toured, called Fosse. This number stopped the show. There's a song in Damn Yankees that has absolutely nothing to do with the plot, but we're going to give it a free pass anyway because it's so much fun and because it's the only time that Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon danced together in a musical as opposed to an occasional TV special. The title is Who's Got the Pain? And it's a mambo that's nearly as eccentric as the dance routine that Bob Fosse devised for the pajama game, which, as you know, was Steam Heat. And this, I think, is really ironic. Fosse was actually an MGM contract player in the early 1950s before he hit Broadway. But Damn Yankees was the only one of Gwen Verdon's musicals that she got to do on film, which is one reason why this movie is priceless. I think you know that whenever I have the chance to talk about perfectionism in musicals, I do it because I'm so inspired by that. And Who's Got the Pain is a perfect example of perfectionism. I want you to hear what Bob Fosse said to his assistant, Pat Ferrier, before they filmed the number. He said, "Watch us closely. If my leg is higher even by half an inch, or we aren't exactly together, stop us. Don't even let them keep shooting." Well, he got what he was going for.
Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? Who's got the pain when they go up? Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? I don't know who. Do you? Who needs a pill when they do the mambo? Who needs a pill when they go up? Who needs a pill when they do the mambo? I don't know who. Do you? Someone must be sick with the heat, or stepping on everyone's feet. But if everyone's feeling okay, why don't they just say olé when the music carries them away? Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? Who's got the pain when they go up? Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? I don't know who. Do you?
So, what do we make of Damn Yankees 62 years after it was first released in movie theaters? I think, the term I'm tempted to use here is fast-paced, because that's what all the critics said back then. But George Abbott didn't much like that term, even though it was the one that everybody applied to his work. I had a chance to interview him when he was 99, and he said he preferred the term peppy. And peppy it is, with a sturdy screenplay written by himself and those wonderful show tunes by Richard Adler and Jerry Ross, and by what amounted to George Abbott's little repertory company of comic actors. What you're going to find problematic, I think, and even in an unpretentious musical comedy like this, are the stereotypes, and they run right down the line. I mean, the ball players are mostly dumb, and only one of them is African American. I mean, this is inexcusable because Jackie Robinson had broken the so-called color barrier 11 years earlier, and by 1958, blacks comprised about 30% of the starting lineups in the major leagues, but not in this movie. Besides which, the married women give undue attention to hair curlers and bridge clubs, and although Ray Walston's comic turn in the song "Those Were the Good Old Days" is a swell takeoff on an Al Jolson vaudeville specialty, and although it has one of Stanley Donen's trademark split-screen effects, as you can see, you're going to run into lyrics that include some objectionable references, namely to cannibals and Indians. 1958 it is. But one character who does impress me is the quote-unquote girl reporter, Gloria Thorpe, played by Broadway's splendid Ray Allen. I would call Gloria a proto-feminist. And if you're looking for depth in this unabashedly escapist entertainment, look no further than Gwen Verdon, a triple threat dancer, singer, actor who took the acting as seriously as everything else she did, and who made every dance an acting challenge. It's often been said that what kept Gwen Verdon from being a movie star was that she was too New York. For example, listen to what she says about Lola's attempted seduction of Joe, in which Gwen is mocking sexuality, right down to a fake Spanish accent and a little girl voice, which is silly, but also, ironically, sophisticated.
You're no exception to the rule. I'm irresistible, you fool. Give in.
One of the highlights of the movie for me was having Gwen dance around me while I was just sitting there devoured by her and so engaged with her. That's so Bobby polishing the shoes.
What will we do?
And the subtlety of it too, the way it starts and then just builds and builds and builds to the end. This is a really great musical number. And this was way ahead of its time. I mean, it was rather risque for that time. My character was kind of guileless and kind of square. And so everything she did was twice as staggering to me. You know, all one had to do throughout this number is just sit there and to react what was happening. She wasn't just dancing, but she was acting while she was dancing. That made the package complete. It's like a singer that sings or a singer that acts while they sing. And I don't mean obvious acting, I mean it has to be organic. And that's the great thing about Gwen, she was so organic.
What I liked about it was it turned out being very sexy, but it didn't act sexy. He understood that so well. I think I'd faint if I had to act sexy. I think I'd look like I needed a ham sandwich. But just to be sexy, I could never do that.
And I want you to watch for the 2 or 3 tiny moments when her character really is being serious. She invests those moments with a touching truthfulness. Damn Yankees is hardly ever revived these days, although in 1994, Jerry Lewis starred in a Broadway production that ran more than a year. Ethan Morden, my favorite musical theater historian, says that what makes this musical truly special isn't the baseball and hell stuff. It's that this is truly a love story in which even the devil cannot separate the middle-aged Joe Boyd from his wife. Since we opened this intro with my Cleveland story, we're going to close with another one, only this one relates directly to Damn Yankees. Because in 1957, the year before the film was released, Johnny Price, who ran Musicarnival in Warrensville Heights, famous summer stock tent theater, Johnny Price had the idea of changing the setting from Washington, D.C. to Cleveland because Cleveland had nearly as many losing seasons as the Washington Senators. So he got permission to do that. At least I think he got permission because you never quite knew with Johnny. But he did it, and he even played the manager, Van Buren, who leads the team in singing Heart. And there's some other changes that got made along the way. The one that tickles me most is that instead of the devil welcoming Lola to the nation's capital, Johnny changed it. Cleveland had a slogan back then, and he decided to use it. So he had the devil say, "Welcome to the best location in the nation." And I got to tell you, I've heard the audio tapes of those performances. The audience went wild. Well, there's so much that delights us in this film, even if the location isn't Cleveland. See you July 24 for the live streamed Q&A. And in the meantime, play ball! I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project.